I want to start by saying that I am not a person who scares easily. I grew up in Chicago. I have taken the L home at 2 in the morning more times than I can count. I have walked through neighborhoods that people who do not live in this city would consider unsafe, and I have always trusted my instincts, always been aware of my surroundings, always done the things that women are told to do and that we learn to do automatically. Keys between fingers, phone in hand, earbuds out. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand that when I say I was frightened on the night of the 14th of September 3 years ago, I am not describing the ordinary low-level anxiety of a woman alone on a city street at night. I'm describing something different, something that I knew in the specific animal way that the body knows things before the brain does was genuinely dangerous. I had been at a friend's apartment in Logan Square for a dinner that ran later than intended. It was a Thursday, nearly midnight when I left. The walk to the Blue Line station was about 12 minutes, a route I had walked dozens of times, well lit, through a neighborhood I knew well. I said goodbye to my friends, put my jacket on, and started walking. The man was behind me before I reached the first corner. I did not see him appear. He was simply there when I turned right onto Milwaukee Avenue, a figure behind me on the pavement, maybe 30 feet back, walking in the same direction. This in itself was not alarming. Milwaukee Avenue at midnight on a Thursday is not empty. People walk it all the time. I registered him the way you register other pedestrians, peripheral awareness, filed, and moved past. What made me look again was the pace. I walk quickly, always have. It is a habit born of city living and a natural gait that most people find difficult to match without noticeably speeding up. This man was matching it precisely, not gaining on me, not falling behind, keeping exactly 30 feet of distance with no apparent effort. I noticed this after about a block and a half and told myself it was coincidence. Same destination, similar pace. It happened. I took a left at the next intersection instead of continuing straight. The straight route was faster and more direct. The left turn took me half a block out of my way. I did this not because I had decided to test anything, but because some part of me had already made the assessment and was acting on it before I had consciously caught up. He turned left too. I kept my pace. I did not run. Running is the thing you do not do because running is acknowledgement, and acknowledgement changes the dynamic in ways that are difficult to predict and difficult to recover from. I kept my pace and I pulled out my phone and I texted my friend whose apartment I had just left. I said, I think someone is following me on Milwaukee, heading toward the Blue Line. She responded immediately. She said she was calling me right now. Her call came through in under 10 seconds. I answered and spoke loudly, the way you do when you want to be heard by someone other than the person on the line. I said I was almost at the station. I could see it. Everything was fine. None of this was entirely true, but all of it was useful. I turned right onto the block that led to the station entrance. He turned right too. I was now less than a block from the station, and I had a decision to make. The entrance was well lit, staffed with other people moving through it. Getting into the station meant getting into a defined space with other people and cameras and a transit authority employee behind glass. It also meant going through a turnstile and down a set of stairs, and if he followed me through the turnstile and down the stairs, I would be on a platform, a long concrete platform with limited exits, waiting for a train that might not come for 8 minutes. I did not go into the station. I stopped outside it, on the pavement, under the bright overhead light of the entrance awning, and I turned around. He was 20 feet behind me. He stopped when I stopped. We stood there on the pavement looking at each other for a moment. I am not sure exactly how long. Time was not functioning normally, but long enough that it was clearly not accidental, not the pause of someone who happened to stop for a reason unrelated to me stopping. He was a man of indeterminate age, 30s or 40s, I could not tell. Medium height, dark jacket, hands in his pockets. His face was not remarkable. His expression was not remarkable. He was simply standing there looking at me, 20 feet away, with no apparent intention of explaining why he was doing that. I said loudly and clearly, there were 2 other people within earshot entering the station behind me, "I see you." This is not something I had planned to say. It is simply what came out, and I think it was the right thing because it was specific and public and named what was happening without asking a question he could deflect or deny. He stood there for another moment. Then he turned and walked back the way we had come, unhurried, the same pace he had been maintaining for the past 6 blocks, until he turned a corner and was gone. I stood on the pavement for a moment. My friend was still on the phone. I told her what had just happened. She told me to stay exactly where I was and she would call a lift from her account to pick me up directly from the station entrance. I said that was not necessary. She said she was doing it anyway. The car came in 4 minutes. I got in and I went home and I sat in my apartment for a while with the lights on and my phone in my hand. I reported it to the police non-emergency line the following morning. I described him as best I could. The officer who took my report was professional and thorough and told me that without a name or identifying information, there was limited action they could take, but that the report would be on file. He said I had done the right things: phone call, the well-lit area, the verbal acknowledgement. He said the verbal acknowledgement was particularly effective because it removed the plausible deniability that people like that rely on. People like that. I have thought about that phrase many times since. The assumption that there is a category of person who does this, who walks behind a woman at a precise 30-foot distance for 6 blocks in the dark, then stops when she stops and looks at her and says nothing and walks away when named. I do not know what he wanted. I am not sure I want to know. I know that the thing I said, "I see you," was true, and that it was what made the difference, and that for several months after that night, I took a different route to the Blue Line station. Not a longer one, just a different one, because knowing a route well, it turns out, is not the same as feeling safe on it. Some knowledge comes at a cost you do not fully understand until you have paid it. I live in a suburb of Perth, the kind of suburb that people who have lived in cities their whole lives would find almost eerily quiet. Wide streets, low houses, good street lighting, the occasional dog walking its owner. The kind of place where you feel walking home at night that nothing could happen because this is the kind of place where nothing happens. I had believed this about my suburb without particularly thinking about it. It was just background, the assumed safety of a residential neighborhood at midnight where everyone is inside and the streets belong to no one in particular. I believed this until the night I walked home from a friend's place and realized over the course of about 4 blocks that I was not the only one on those streets. It was a Saturday in February, summer in Western Australia, the night still warm enough that the walk was pleasant, about 25 minutes from Ben's place to my house. I had done it before, would do it again. I was not in any particular hurry. I had my phone in my back pocket and my keys in my hand, not for any defensive reason, but because I always carry my keys when I walk so I can get in the door without stopping to search for them. I was thinking about the game we had watched, about something Ben had said about work, about nothing that would become important later. I turned into my street from the main road, about a 5-minute walk from my house, and I heard footsteps behind me. Not close, maybe 40, 50 meters, on the pavement on the same side of the street. I did not turn around because the sound of footsteps on a pavement is not a reason to turn around. It is a completely ordinary sound on a street where other people live and occasionally move through. I kept walking. The footsteps kept the same distance. My street is long and straight. From the corner where I turned in, my house is about 500 meters. There are no turnings in between. It is a straight shot along a uniform residential street, houses on both sides, parked cars at intervals, no shops or destinations that would explain why someone else might be walking in the same direction at the same time. After about 200 meters, I registered properly what I was hearing. Not the irregular footsteps of someone on their way somewhere, the accelerating and decelerating of a natural gait, the pauses to check a phone or adjust a bag. These footsteps were even, measured, maintaining a consistent interval behind me with the kind of precision that is not natural, that has to be deliberate, that requires paying attention to me rather than to wherever you were going. I crossed to the other side of the street. The footsteps crossed too. The sound changed, the slight hollow percussion of footsteps crossing an empty residential road at midnight, and then resumed on the opposite pavement, still behind me, still at the same interval. I stopped. I stopped walking mid-stride, and the footsteps stopped too. I was standing in a pool of streetlight. I did not turn around. I stood still for 5 seconds, counting them deliberately because my brain needed something to do, and the street was completely quiet. Then I walked, fast this time, not running but close to it, the specific gait of someone who is covering distance as efficiently as possible without the commitment of a full sprint. I covered the remaining 300 meters in under 2 minutes. I got to my door, got the key in the lock on the first try, got inside, closed, and locked the door. I stood in my hallway with my hand on the lock, and I listened. Footsteps on the pavement outside, even, unhurried, continuing past my house without stopping, continuing for another few seconds and then fading, continuing as if whoever it was had simply been going in this direction all along, as if the crossed street, the maintained interval, the stopped when I stopped, all of it was coincidence. I stood in the hallway for a long time. My house was quiet around me. Outside, the suburb was quiet, the kind of quiet it always was at midnight, that I had always found comfortable, that had always felt like safety. I called Ben and told him what had happened. He was quiet for a moment and then asked if I wanted him to come over. I said no. I said I was fine. I said I was probably overreacting. He said, gently, that I had crossed the street and the person had crossed the street. I said yes. He said that was not someone going for a walk. I knew that already. I think I had known it from the moment I heard the footsteps cross the road behind me. But there is a difference between knowing something and being willing to say it clearly, and at that point I was not quite willing. Ben was willing, and hearing it said clearly was useful. I drive home now if I am at Ben's after 10. The suburb is still quiet. The streets are still wide and well lit and residential. Walking it at midnight is almost certainly fine on almost every night that has passed since then and will pass in the future. Almost every night. That is the adjustment that experience makes, from certainly to almost certain, from safe to probably safe. It is not a large change, but it is permanent, and it lives in the body rather than the head, in the way I listen before I turn a corner, and the way I clock the distance between myself and the nearest lit house, and the way I have not walked home alone from Ben's at midnight since that February Saturday. Some adjustments you make once and do not need to revisit. You simply live inside them. I know the exact duration because I checked my phone when I got inside. 14 minutes. From the moment I first noticed him outside the Tesco on Oxford Road to the moment I closed my front door and pressed my back against it in the dark hallway of my flat. 14 minutes that I have gone over so many times in the 4 years since that I can replay them with the specific quality of a film I have watched too often.
the images slightly worn at the edges, the sound slightly too familiar, but the feeling it produces unchanged. I was 27. I was living in Fallowfield, the student area of Manchester, though I was no longer a student. I had graduated 2 years earlier and stayed because the rent was cheaper than the city center, and I liked the neighborhood, liked its density and its noise, and the fact that at 9 on a Tuesday evening there were always people on the street and the chicken shops were always open, and it felt, fundamentally, like a place that was occupied. I had been to the Tesco on Oxford Road for a few things after work, came out at 9:15 with a carrier bag that was heavier than I had anticipated, and adjusted it to my left hand and started walking home. Home was 14 minutes. I know this now with precision, know it in minutes and seconds, but at the time I knew it simply as a walk I had done hundreds of times, a route so familiar it required no thought. He was outside the Tesco when I came out, leaning against the wall to the right of the entrance, looking at his phone. I noticed him the way you notice anyone in your immediate vicinity when you exit a building. A brief scan, filed, moved past. Dark coat, trainers, mid-20s perhaps. Nothing that registered beyond the initial scan. I walked. I turned right on Oxford Road, north toward Fallowfield. The evening was cold, late October, that specific Manchester cold that is more damp than sharp, that gets into your coat rather than hitting you on the surface. There were people around, not many, but enough. A couple going in the other direction, a man walking a dog, 2 students with takeaway bags arguing about something in the cheerful way of people who are not really arguing. I became aware of him again at the first set of traffic lights, about 2 minutes from the Tesco. He was behind me. Not immediately behind me, a natural distance, the kind that does not by itself suggest anything. But something made me register him specifically, rather than as general background pedestrian traffic. Something about the coat, the trainers, the way he was not looking at his phone anymore. I crossed with the lights. He crossed with the lights. This proved nothing. These lights were the obvious crossing for anyone heading in the same general direction. I turned left off Oxford Road, down a side street that cut through to my road. This turning was not obvious. It was a shortcut that only made sense if you knew the area, if you were going where I was going or close to it. If you were just heading generally north, you would stay on Oxford Road, which was the main road, the logical route, the route that had more street lighting and more people on it. He turned left too. I stopped pretending I did not know what was happening. I took my phone out of my bag and I called my flatmate, Laura. She answered on the 3rd ring, mid-sentence about something that had happened at her work, and I talked over her. I said, "I'm on Anson Road. I'm 5 minutes away. Can you come to the front door and be there when I get there?" She heard something in my voice that made her stop mid-sentence. She said yes. She said she was going to the door now. I walked. I kept talking to Laura, not about anything meaningful, just talking. The sound of her voice on the other end of the call grounding me, proving there was somewhere I was going, someone who knew I was coming. I did not look back. I had made a decision not to look back, because looking back was a form of engagement I did not want to initiate, and because I did not need to look back to know he was still there. I could hear him. Even over the ambient noise of the street, I could hear his footsteps behind me. The specific rhythm of them had become known to me in a way that footsteps become known when you have been listening to them for 6 minutes and you know they belong to someone who should not be behind you. I turned into my road. My flat is the 3rd building on the left, a converted Victorian terrace, a blue door, 3 stone steps up from the pavement. Laura was at the door. She had not waited inside. She was standing at the top of the steps, door open behind her, lit from the hallway light, watching the road. I walked up the path and up the steps without looking back. Laura put her arm around my shoulders and we went inside, and she closed the door and turned the lock. I stood in the hallway. Laura stood beside me. We were both quiet. After a moment, she said, very quietly, "Was there someone out there?" I said yes.
She asked if he had come to the door. I said I did not know. I said I had not looked. We stood there for another moment. Then Laura went to the front window of the flat. The living room faced the street, and looked out carefully from the side of the curtain. She was quiet for a few seconds. Then she said he was standing on the pavement across the road, just standing there, looking at the building. We called the police. Not 999, the non-emergency line. The officer who took the call was measured and practical. He said that standing on a public pavement was not in itself an offense, but that given the context, following someone home, standing outside, he would send a car to drive past and make a presence felt. He said this was what they could do in the absence of an immediate threat. The car came past about 7 minutes later. Laura watched from the window. She said the man clocked the car and walked away immediately, the way someone walks when they have decided they are done and not in a hurry to show it. He did not come back that night. He has not appeared again in the 4 years since, not that I have ever been certain of, not that I have recognized. But 4 years on, I still check the street when I leave my building. I still notice the people behind me when I walk home at night. I still have the number for the non-emergency police line in my phone, where it was not before that October evening. 14 minutes, the duration of a commute, a podcast episode, a short lunch break, the time it takes if someone has decided to follow you to learn where you live. I think about that sometimes, what 14 minutes can mean, what a person can know about you at the end of them that they did not know at the beginning. I think about it particularly on evenings when I come home alone in the dark, when the street is quiet and my keys are in my hand, and there is the sound of footsteps somewhere behind me that may mean nothing, and that I will monitor quietly until I am inside with the door locked. That is the thing that does not leave, not the fear. The fear fades. What stays is the monitoring. The low-level, constant, automatic calculation of distance and direction and pace that lives in the body now, that was not there before that night, that I did not choose to install and cannot choose to remove. I have been told this is a normal response, a healthy adaptation, that it means my system is working correctly. I understand that this is meant to be reassuring. Most days, it is.
You shouldn't be here unless you've already subscribed to Dr. Nightmare.